Hi, everybody. I'm back with Kelly Augspuger for part two of our conversation. She's a certified senior advisor and long-term care insurance specialist who co-founded Steadfast Insurance with her husband. And without further ado, let's get into this.
Thanks, Todd. Great to be here.
So let's talk about the roadmap for the future.
Mm-hmm.
How to live as best possible and how to protect the recipient and the caregivers.
Yeah. So really the roadmap to planning for care is going to cover those things that we've talked about. Who's going to provide care? How are you going to pay for it? Where do you want to receive care? I created a family roadmap. It's really a guide to extended care planning and even a survivor's guide of what to do after a loved one passes. And it goes through a lot of these things, being able to put in your preferences for care so your family understands your preferences. We want to talk about these things when we're healthy and we're competent. We don't want to wait until that crisis happens. Maybe mom and dad had a stroke. Well, what do we do now? What were their preferences? Nick, did you talk to mom and dad about that? Do you know what they wanted? No, we never had that conversation. Okay. You want to do it before that crisis, before they've aged, before they're frail, while they're competent, to really be able to live well and to reduce those physical, mental, emotional, and financial consequences that we often see when care is provided. So, wanting to protect not only the recipient of care so that they get the care that they deserve and have the quality of life that they deserve and they want, but also protecting the caregivers, protecting the spouse, protecting the adult kids, whoever is their loved ones. Maybe they're even neighbors. Maybe they don't have family, but maybe they're neighbors or close friends that are going to provide the care. Wanting to protect the quality of life of caregivers is extremely important. Again, reduce caregiver burnout, physically, mentally, emotionally. I've seen this multiple times in my family. That caregiver, their health is extremely compromised when they are providing care day in and day out. It's a slippery slope. And so those caregivers need to take care of themselves, which means there need to be boundaries set. Okay. There has to be time for the caregiver. They need to physically take time for themselves, mentally and emotionally and spiritually take time for themselves, or else they're not going to be able to care for the care recipient.
I understand.
Yeah. Yes. I know you do. As a caregiver, I know you do, Todd. Yeah.
So all of this to this point, it's a lot to take in. Now,
Sure.
Folks watching, I'm imagining the audience is going to fall into different camps, so to speak. You're going to have those that wanted to watch, listen, so that they think about, okay, what did we do? What can we learn that we could do different?
Mm-hmm.
And then there are others who are actively looking for something and help. And then there are others who are just curious. And now they're sitting here going, oh my God, I have no plan of care. Where and how do I start? What do you say to them?
Yeah. So today is a good day to do it. Don't put it off until tomorrow, right? We don't want to wait till that crisis. We make irrational decisions often and emotional decisions when we're in that crisis. And so where do you start? You want to think about who's going to provide the care, where you want to receive care, how are you going to pay for care? Okay. You want to talk to your family. If you have a spouse, talk to your spouse or your partner. If you have adult kids, talk to your adult kids. Whoever's in your life that you think, really would be making some decisions for you and helping you in that process, you want to talk to them now. You want to think about these things. If you have adult children, do you want them involved in your care? Can they be involved in your care? Do they want to be involved in your care? If you have adult kids, do they even live in the same city as you? They might live a couple hours away or even another state. And so it's not logistically possible for them to provide care or help you, right? Physically help you. They might be able to help coordinate some care. They might be able to help make phone calls or, book some appointments for you, over the phone, through email, those types of things online. But physically, unless they relocate, which I doubt they want to do, especially if they have a job, if they have a family, if they're settled down, in another location, it's probably not feasible for them to be able to relocate, nor do they probably want to. I mean, I'm sure They love you, right? And when it comes to family, we love our family so much that we want to do whatever we can, but there's also a line. There's a boundary of mom, dad, like I just can't. I can't do it. This is what I can do. I can make phone calls. I can vet resources with you. But when it comes to providing the care, I can't do it. And so talking with your family ahead of time around these things is really important to come up with a plan, and how you're going to pay for it. If you're going to provide some type of professional care, which I would highly recommend, home care agencies, or, if you move into a facility, again, there are wonderful facilities out there to really reduce that burden on your family, on your loved ones. They can still be involved to some degree, right? Maybe they are helping to coordinate some care and even helping with meals, those types of things. But so they don't have to physically hands-on provide the care, that's going to protect them and their family too.
Absolutely. So in this process, you've mentioned a number of times crisis mode.
Yeah.
So within that crisis mode, what is typically missed or unattainable if it's in a crisis mode?
Yeah. So, if there's no planning that has happened, we are going to see a lack of peace of mind. We're going to see a lack of efficiency, especially on the financial side. If you are self-funding your care or your family member is providing that care, we are seeing maybe a spouse or an adult family member is maybe reducing hours at work because now they're providing care to you. What is that doing to their financial plan? If they are not able to work for full time anymore, that's really putting a wrench in their future and their financial future for their family. So not having a financial plan, we are seeing a lack of efficiency. You're self-funding and you're not getting leverage. You're not getting the power of insurance. Even think about your homeowner's insurance, your car insurance. You have all that leverage. You pay your monthly premium so that if you get in an accident or something happens to your home, you know what? Well, I'm paying a small portion in premium for this big amount of coverage. And that's what long-term care insurance does too, right? You're paying these smaller amount of premiums to have this big bucket of money to pay for care. So we're seeing a lack of financial efficiency, lack of peace of mind, and we're just seeing chaos really because the family is scrambling to figure out, what do we do? We're Googling, we're trying to figure out, okay, talking to the siblings. Well, can you take off work this day? Can you come in town? Can you make these phone calls? Can you talk to this home care provider? There's so many things to consider in that crisis mode. And so there are lots of things that are missed if you're not having these conversations and planning ahead. Now, does that mean it's going to be easy if you have a plan? No, it's never easy when caregiving is involved, but it will be easier and there will be less burden. Okay. It's going to be a little easier. And so again, we want to reduce the burden. We want to make it a little easier. And by planning ahead, that's what you can get.
Let's talk at a high level, just to help folks understand. Many people already know who are listening, but for those who aren't, or to reinforce those who do, what does an overall plan consist of?
Yeah. So with the extended care, the long-term care component, right? We've said this many times, it's the who, it's the where, it's the how. What is that going to look like? Along with that, I always highly encourage my clients. I ask them, have you done estate planning? What does that mean? Have you had papers, legal documents drawn up? Do you have a will, a living will, maybe a trust? Do you have a healthcare and financial power of attorneys? Do you have these really important estate planning documents in place and worked with a professional to make sure you've dotted your I's, you've crossed your T's. And then I make sure my clients, if they haven't done that, happy to give them referrals. Here are some local people that you can talk to be able to get that done as well. And then tuck in your long-term care insurance policy in with that estate plan. Tuck in your roadmap that I've given you. You filled out your preference of care. You filled out, location of important documents, important people to call so that your spouse, your loved ones, your family, your people know who to call, where to look, what to do in the event that these things happen. So the estate plan is crucial alongside that extended care plan.
So let's switch over. It's really not a switch. It's a mosey on over. Let's mosey on over and talk more specifically about the long-term care plan and insurance. And you've alluded to this over the past half hour we've been talking. So how not having a long-term care plan, how it can be catastrophic? I mean, what are the biggest risks in retirement? You know, why and how that happens. And you have alluded to it, but I think now's the time to really hit home on it.
Yeah. So if there is an extended care situation, Todd, financially, this really is one of your biggest risks in retirement. Okay. If you need care, it can quickly drain what you've worked your entire life for, right? We work for many, many years to save and invest, to plan for our future, to plan for retirement. And if you need care, it just can quickly deplete all those savings and those investments. Just to give you an idea of how much does care even cost? You know, if people haven't even looked at that yet, let's talk about how much care costs. So median cost of care nationwide, you know, this is from the west to the east and all in the middle nationwide. If we're looking at home care, we're looking at a little over $5,100 per month for home care. That's just based on 44 hours of care per week. Obviously, if you need more, if you need 24 hours of care, that could easily be $20,000 a month. Okay. That's for home care. An assisted living facility, again, median cost of care nationwide is about $4,500 a month. If you want a private room in a skilled nursing facility, you're looking about $9,000 per month. Okay. That's 1 month. If you need care for a year, 2 years, 5 years, think about how catastrophic that really could be. The duration and level of care that we see, it varies from person to person, okay? Stats are thrown out all over the place. And honestly, I don't like stats because they don't accurately reflect what's going to happen to you, right? We don't know how much, if I'm going to need care at all, or maybe I'm going to need 10 years. It's really so different person to person. Now, I am going to give you some averages just nationwide, but again, these can be very deceiving. For women on average nationwide, 3.7 years of needing some care. Okay. For men, it's about 2.2. About a third of 65-year-olds today may never need any long-term care support. But 20% are going to need more than 5 years of care. If there's a cognitive impairment, though, that could be 5 years. It could be 10 years. It could be 15, 20 years. I mean, really, Parkinson's, dementia, Alzheimer's. People can live a very long time with these cognitive issues. And I will tell you, even in long-term care insurance claims, we are seeing that more people are on claim for cognitive issues than even for physical impairments. So this continues to rise and rise. So, you know, looking at those numbers, right? If you're needing care for years, think about this could cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. What is that doing to your retirement plan? What is that doing to your family? If they're providing care to you for years of care, right? Again, going back to the caregiver burnout. So no retirement plan is complete without a plan for extended care. Everyone needs to talk about how am I going to pay for it? Who's going to provide it? Where am I going to receive care? You have to. It's a must.
And this leads back to a little bit you alluded to earlier. If you can shed more light on the caregiver, the patient advocate, often one and the same, how can they be a part of the planning and moving things along?
Yeah, so be a part of the conversation. You know, when let's say you're a parent, maybe you're in your 50s, maybe 60s, and you're looking into planning for the future. You're looking into planning for extended care, considering long-term care insurance, okay? Talking to your kids, you know, do you want to be involved in my care? Do you think you might be able to coordinate your care? What does that look like? We want the care recipient, again, to stay in control of care options, to receive quality care, and we want to protect the loved ones physically, mentally, emotionally, and financially. And so talking to your loved ones about preferences for care, that is a part of the planning process. And so adult kids, how can they even help move things along? If your parents have not brought this up to you, bring it up to them. Mom, dad, do you guys have a plan for extended care? If not, can we talk about this? Like, I love you so much. We genuinely care about you. We want to protect you. We want to protect ourselves. So this is really important to consider. Where do you want to receive care? How are you going to pay for that care? Who's going to provide that care? Can we talk about that and work through these things? And, and that's where bringing a professional can be helpful too. I think some things to consider, Todd, with these conversations between parents and kids, it can be awkward. It can be very awkward, but you have to do it. I would encourage people, don't do this at holiday time. Don't do this around your Christmas meal, your New Year's meal, your Hanukkah meal, whatever it is. Like, those are high emotion times for the good and for the bad, right? There are lots of high emotions when holidays, it's that holiday time. So try to plan outside of a holiday time. Maybe you're just going to gather together for a dinner at your home, but you set an agenda and you say, okay, this is something we haven't addressed before, kids or mom and dad. And it's really important, and not just blindsiding them, let them know in advance. We're going to talk about these things. We want you to be prepared emotionally, mentally, right? We want people to be in that headspace. This is really important. We want to sit down and talk about this. So let's grab some dinner. It's just going to be informal. We're going to have a meal. Let's talk about this. So again, not at holiday time, but being prepared and thinking about ahead of time, again, who, where, how. And then staying positive, I think, is really important. So, again, telling your family how much you love them, that you're generally concerned, reminding them of the benefits of planning ahead. Mom and dad or kids, we don't want you to be in a crisis mode. So this is really important to consider now while we're healthy, while we're competent, we're making these good decisions now, knowing that in the future, we might have to be flexible and some things might change. Right? Circumstances might come up that we hadn't considered. And so we have to be flexible, but if we have a general roadmap for what we want things to look like, we're going to be in better shape. We want to be good listeners. Adults, kids, parents want to be good listeners. We want to really hear each other of what their concerns are, what their preferences are, and show respect. Acknowledge what they're feeling, acknowledge what their desires are, what their choices are. Mom and dad might say, oh yeah, we want to stay in our home and you're not moving us ever. We are going to stay put forever. You cannot, pull us from our house. Don't put us in that facility. Okay, mom and dad, I understand how you feel. I probably agree. Like, I probably want to stay at home as long as possible too, but let's just talk about that. Is it realistic to stay at home forever if you need 24 hours of care? Again, remember what we talked about earlier. That might not be realistic. So if it comes to a point where you do need 24/7 care, maybe an assisted living wouldn't be bad. Like, oh, my friends, like mom, they recently just moved into whatever facility down the street, and it's been wonderful for them. Maybe that's something to consider. Okay. So that, I think, is a really great place to start, and then ask for help. Planning for care, it's complicated. And I think people often spend more time planning their vacations than they do spend planning for care and even planning for retirement. So ask for help from professionals. Reach out again to your estate planner, get those legal documents done. Reach out to a long-term care insurance specialist to look into, can you fund a policy? Does that make sense? There are lots of local places that can help you too. Your local elder care planning council. I'm actually on the board of our local Central Ohio Care Planning Council, but you can go to longtermcarelink.net and you can look at a local place near you. And basically in that region, they will have maybe 10 or more professionals that really help elders, help plan for care, help really families navigate these situations. There are also local area agencies on aging, AAA, wonderful organizations to look at, and even your state long-term care ombudsman, home care agencies, facility locators. There are lots of resources available, but you got to look for it and you got to ask for help.
Absolutely. They are tough conversations, no doubt. They don't always go smooth.
Right.
There's some where they just won't happen. Either the parents or the children don't want to talk about it. You had mentioned earlier, and I don't know if it's exactly what you were referring to, but you mentioned get professional help. So when I heard that, I'm thinking, well, maybe you need an intermediary to have that discussion.
Yeah, that's often a good thing. I mean, there are mediators out there as well. That's one of the professionals. So if you know, with your family, if your family's really resistant to having these conversations, or maybe you're actually in that crisis mode now and you need a mediator to help you make decisions and to navigate that process, there are attorneys. I've got a great one in my network that you can look to help you really talk through these things to come to an agreement. And even counselors, you know, I mean, if you need to have a therapist, you know, work through some of these emotional things, because it really is, when you're talking about care, a lot of times previous experience comes up, history, right? If you're talking to your parents, they might have some really icky feelings and things that they've gone through, maybe with their parents or other family members. And so it's a heavy, heavy thing that they might be dealing with. And so if that means that you have to bring in a counselor, a therapist, like, there's no shame in that. That's a really, really good, healthy thing to do. So seek help from specific professionals that can help you navigate these conversations.
I'm going to add one more layer to that. So and I've talked to folks about this, when you have either the children or the parents who just don't want to have a conversation, they don't want to talk, they don't want to have a counselor come in and be an intermediary. It happens a lot. My suggestion is always, depending upon who it is, try and find out what their friends are doing. Try and find out what some people they respect are doing. Maybe it's a big figure in the news, or, you know, it could be somebody that they've heard about. Do some research and find out. You never know these days. And with the internet and with Google, you can Google something and find out, you know, did J-Lo's mom, did they do anything with that? You know, their mom loves J-Lo. Find some commonality there that's going to make them think and say, hey, you know, so-and-so was doing this for their parent. And that may be the way to soften that approach to get them to come together.
We don't want to be in that crisis mode. So have these conversations, do some planning ahead of time. You know, if you have to spend down to meet Medicaid's requirements, work with a qualified attorney that specialize in Medicaid.
So one further point on that is, for folks who are watching this, and if they've gotten to the end of this and they're looking through, or they've been watching the whole thing, okay, wait, this doesn't apply to me, this doesn't apply to me, this doesn't apply to me. I just don't have the wherewithal or the funds. I want to make sure that these folks understand that they have the resources, as you were talking. Number one, you look at family. Okay, what can family do to help? And then other things that I've often told people, and I would love to hear your thought on it, is look for community organizations that can potentially help you. It might not be the ideal way that you want, but it'll be help nonetheless.
That's where it's important to look, like those resources I shared earlier, AAA, you know, local long-term care ombudsman, those types of places. Maybe even your own, like if you belong to a church or some other community like that, maybe they even have resources, even if it's meals, you know, Meals on Wheels, those types of things, to be able to help a little bit in that process.
Absolutely. There are different organizations, again, whether civic or religious based, that you can tap into and look into. I know there's Catholic Family Services, there's Jewish Family Services, and other family services that you can look into, and you may be surprised. They may have some programs that can help you. And if not, often they're a great resource to help you understand where you can look to help. And they love helping. That's the essence of their organization.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
The primary purpose of the podcast is to educate. While guests are invited to listen, listeners acknowledge that they are not being provided professional advice from the podcast or any guests. One Day, One Week and its sponsor, 17 Commerce LLC, expressly disclaim any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, reliance on, or inability to use the podcast episodes or the information presented in the episodes.